all you cool cats and kittens. Okay, so today we're gonna learn how to cut up a beef round. We're gonna talk about the PPE that you would wear, the different parts of it, and the cuts that you would get from those parts. But the first thing I wanted to show you, this is actually dairy. It's not beef, but that's what we have today. While it's hanging in the air is the best place to remove the tri-tip muscle, which is right here. But since it is dairy, the tri-tip isn't going to be very good, so we're not going to do that. I just wanted to point it out before we put it on the table. But just to go over PPE, first thing you need a hairnet or a hat to cover your hair. You're going to need gloves, cloth, and then rubber gloves over top because it is very cold, so you want these under. You need boots, a frock, and an apron, and then you'll also be wearing chainmail. I don't have any on, but it's basically just a metal covering to make sure you don't cut yourself. But first we're just going to go over how to split it, and as we go we'll talk about the different muscles and what you can do with each of those. But why are we doing any of this? This is our first lesson on meat, and the reason we're doing that is because it's just useful knowledge to have. Say, there's a world pandemic, surprise, and all the grocery stores are out of food, you can't buy any, but you do have a nice beef cow just sitting in the pasture there, but you don't have a grinder, you can't turn it into hamburgers, so you actually have to know how to separate all the muscles. So that's what we're going to learn in this section. So we're going to start with the round. So, first I'm going to go ahead and demo it for you guys, and we'll talk through it all, and then you're actually going to do it yourself. We have two parts here. We have the strip loin, and then the sirloin, and then the round. We're going to separate this from the round, and we're just going to focus on that today. So, first thing you're going to do, find this pelvic bone here, call it the H bone in the industry. You're going to use two fingers and cut on the other side of them, and you're going to split it right there. Right through that bone. The bones, you're just going to take your knife. And separate these two if I can. Now that you're worn out, we're gonna start on the leg side here. So, as you go through here, just an overview. This is our shank portion, and then our pelvic bone we'll take out, and then there's a bunch of different muscles in here that we're gonna separate and talk about those. But first we're gonna take the leg off. Breath. You're going to do that by just cutting through this tendon. Tendons connect muscle to bone. And then as we go through here, we're going to cut up alongside this tibia bone here, and you follow it until you reach where it kind of rounds off at the end. And that's where it's meeting with the femur bone. So you're going to cut around it. You can kind of guess that the joint's going to be right in here. So we're going to take this top layer off and see if we're right. Cut through the ligaments. Ligaments attach bone to bone. So we're just going to use our knife to cut through here. All you need to do any of this processing is a knife and a saw, like you saw before. You're going to need a sharp knife, and if you have to sharpen it throughout, you might have to do that. But we're just going to continue to cut through these tendons, or these ligaments, and through the connective tissue. You don't need a saw for this part. You can usually just separate them with your knife. All right, and there we go. Just cut right through that. And now you have a bone for your dog, if you wish. You can cut the shank meat off. Some cultures use that. We don't. So then we're gonna cut the rest of the pelvic bone out, which is this bone. It's really funky, you just need to pay attention to what you're doing. You wanna make sure and keep very close to the bone so you don't start cutting into the roasts and scoring them. It's a really funky shape, but as long as you stay close to the bone, you won't mess it up. So it goes around this back side and up under here. And finally, it wraps around the femur, the end of the femur here. So you just want to separate that connective tissue with your knife. We've just stayed close to this bone as best we can. Now, as you're doing this, you want to make sure you're not cutting towards yourself. You're taking your time, not rushing. So you could cut yourself, but as long as you're being careful, you'll be fine. And then in here, you'll see I did kind of cut into the meat. There on the ends, it's not a big deal because we'll cut it up and make it look nice. But if it's too bad and you can't do that, it will be rejected for retail and you're being graded on that. So, the first muscle we're gonna take out, we call it the tip roast. You start on this side, the same side that you took that leg off. You're just gonna peel back some of this connective tissue here, this fascia, and whenever you do that, you'll see that there are different seams in here that separate the muscles, and the one right here separates the top round roast and the tip roast that we're about to take out. So, on this face here, you can see this round muscle right here. That's the tip roast, that's what we're taking out. And then you'll see this seam run across here. You're just gonna take your knife carefully and separate that seam out as best you can. You can get your thumb in there, your finger, do that if you're more comfortable doing that so you don't cut into it. But you're just gonna take your time, follow that seam all the way back to the bone. All right. And after you guys cut up the round, I'm gonna have you label each section that you took out with a note card, and then I'd like you to put at least 2 cuts that you can get from each of the roasts. You can get creative. I'll talk about a few during class, but you can also look some up on Google, see some different things that you could do with it. Look up recipes, just anything, and put that on your note card as well. But that is up to you. If you just want to list the ones that we talked about, that's okay. But if you do have time, I'd like you to get creative and find some different ways that you could use these muscles. So what we're doing here is we followed that seam all the way back to the bone, you can see there. And now we're just gonna feather it down. Just slowly cut along that bone. You don't want to cut too much because you'll dull the end of your knife. But keep cutting until you get right under it. And once you do that, you should see another seam at the bottom here. There we go. You can see there. And once you get it all the way across, separate it. You just throw stuff on the ground. And then you can pull your round to the end of your table to use it for a little bit of leverage here. In beef, the seams are a lot more prominent. In dairy, they're not. So, as you can see here, I have kind of started cutting into it more than I had planned. Okay, here's our seam back here finally. And we're just gonna follow that, and we'll be able to pull this whole muscle out together. There we go. So we found that. We'll pull our round to the end of the table, and from there you can use your knife just to carefully roll this muscle out. All right. And we're just gonna cut across. And here's our tip roast. You'll want, for retail sale, which is what we're going for today, you'll want to remove anything, any unwanted parts, so any aging, dried tissue on it. You'll just want to take that off. We call it facing, whenever you take all of the edges off. So with the tip roast, you can do a few things. Most people cut it into roasts, or they'll use it as steaks. You could also cut it into stew meat or make cube steaks out of it. Okay, here's our tip roast. Next, we're gonna go ahead, take the femur bone out, and then we'll separate the top round, bottom round, and eye round. But that's all we have time for today. Will you